Hello everyone. Today I will be retelling you the chapter 13 of Sons and Lovers. The chapter starts telling us about Paul and Baxter Dawes. And at the beginning, when Paul had been to the theater with Clara, that was a big commotion to Baxter Dawes. And after that, Paul Morel was with his friends at the punch bowl, sharing a good moment. And suddenly, as you can see, Baxter Dawes came in and started insulting Paul Morel for being the night before with Clara, and that was a big mess that he had with them. But this guy, Baxter Dawes, was a guy who was losing his firmness of flesh, so he was angry for that. And the night before he had quarreled with his sister, so that's why he had to go to cheap lodgings. So another interesting fact to say about them, about Paul and Baxter Dawes, is that they weren't good friends. They didn't have a good intimacy between them, so they didn't have a good communication between them. But in some moments, yes, they talk each other. So the main point in this, at the beginning of this chapter, is this: that Baxter Dawes was insulting Paul Morel for because he had gone with Clara to the theater. So he was like insulting him. And this is a friend of them, of Paul Morel and Baxter Dawes, and both of them were insulting them, and especially him to Paul Morel, because they were talking about Clara, if she was a good tart, and about the costume that this guy Paul Morel took when he took Clara to the theater. So it was a moment in which this guy Paul Morel got angry, and he took half a glass of beer and turned it over this guy, over Baxter Dawes' face. So Baxter Dawes got up of the chair and started like making a mess with him, and he wanted to start a fight with him. So at that moment, this guy was trembling behind the bar, and this guy was the barmaid of the punch bowl, and suddenly he rang the bell and called the choker out. This is the choker out. And this guy tried to get him off, to get Baxter Dawes off of the place, because he wanted to avoid a big commotion over there. So then everything was fine. So they settled that situation, and the air was clear. And after that, this lady, the barmaid, started like advising Paul Morel, and he asked him if he could box, because he knew that Baxter Dawes was going to look at revenge. So to protect Paul Morel, he asked to Mr. Jenkinson to go along with him in the way back home. Well, another important scenario in this is that Paul Morel was talking with Clara. Paul Morel in this time was with Clara, and in the first scenario, Clara didn't know, Paul Morel, didn't know about the husbands of Clara. So at this time, Clara told him about his husband, and Paul Morel realized that guy was Baxter Dawes, that was at the night before trying to start a fight. And at this time, Clara was looking for him, because she wanted him to take care of himself, because he knew very well how Baxter Dawes was. So she was trying to protect him. But Paul Morel was relaxed. He was not giving attention to the situation that he had created with Baxter Dawes. And in this situation and in this occasion was an important fact that Paul Morel realized. It was like an assumption for him, because he thought that Clara wanted to look at revenge with Baxter Dawes. So Paul Morel asked her if she wanted to slay Paul Morel for her sake. So they were like fighting. This was not a clear conversation because after that they were fighting for what he had said. So they started like talking over about that. And another important fact in this is that Paul Morel for several days had not seen Baxter Dawes. But after some days at the spiral room, he met Baxter Dawes. He was on the way up to where his boss was, and at that time he found Baxter Dawes. So Baxter Dawes was working with them in the same building. So they started talking, and they got like a difficult situation in there because Baxter Dawes was looking for a revenge. So he found Paul in there. But at this time, this guy asked him to go where Fanny was, and he told him he asked him to go where Fanny was and told her that Baxter Dawes wanted the order 097. And this guy went to where Fanny was, and they got a little conversation there, a chit chat, and after that he returned to where Baxter Dawes was. So he told her that Fanny didn't want to give him anything. So they were there, and at that moment he tried to run away because he didn't want to stay with him. So this guy give her a detaining hand. So they started fighting again, and at that moment the office boy realized about the situation that was creating him, and he said, hey, what's happening there? So he stopped Baxter Dawes, and because of that Thomas Jenkinson was there. So he stepped out of his little glass office and tried to make the rule, to make everything clear there. So this guy tried to get Baxter Dawes off because he was like stingy. He thought that he was stingy, so he was sneering after them. And this guy tried to get him off, so he took Baxter arms, and this guy with a jerk of his arm threw Thomas Jenkinson away, and he hit with the spring door. So there was a commotion because this guy, Thomas Jenkinson, couldn't receive any help. So at the following day, Thomas Jenkinson was ill and dismissed Baxter Dawes. So he summoned him for assault, and at the next day, Paul Morel was with Clara. And there was something important in here, that Paul Morel didn't tell anything to his mother. This is his mother, Mrs. Morel. So he wasn't like keeping things hidden to her. And at the end of the first part of the chapter, Paul Morel was with Clara, and he told her that this guy was going to go to Nottingham because he wanted to sell his designs and he wanted to look for a better future with her without him. So Clara was sad and started questioning him. So that's all of the first part of the chapter 13. Thank you for paying attention.